For 3 years, Silas Ward spoke to no one. Not a word. His weathered fence posts, gray and splintered, stood as a barrier between his isolated ranch and the dusty road to town. He'd built that fence himself, each post a deliberate act of separation from a world that had stripped him bare. Behind those rails, he tended his cattle and horses in silence, a choice born of grief after his wife's death. Words had failed him then, offering no solace against the pain, so he abandoned them entirely. That morning, a girl appeared at his fence. She was no more than 12, her faded blue dress dusted from the long walk, her dark hair neatly braided. She gripped the top rail, her eyes fixed on the horses grazing in the distant pasture with a quiet intensity only children possess. Silas watched from his porch, coffee cooling in his calloused hands. Most townsfolk avoided his land, whispering tales of the hermit rancher who'd lost his mind, who spoke to animals instead of people. But this girl showed no fear, no curiosity about the man behind the fence. She simply watched, still and patient. When she turned to leave, Silas noticed something that tightened his chest. She didn't flinch at the horses neighing or the gate's creak in the wind. The realization hit hard, she was deaf. Her small figure faded down the road, a blue speck against the vast horizon. That night, for the first time in years, Silas wondered about another person. Who was she? Why had she come alone? Why did her presence feel like a crack in the wall around his heart? She returned the next morning, same time, same place, watching his horses with that same quiet focus. Silas studied her from his kitchen window, her intelligent eyes reflecting a loneliness he knew too well. Day after day, she came, never asking for anything, just standing there, as if waiting for something worth her patience. But Silas didn't know Clarabelle. Clara, as she'd later introduce herself, wasn't just watching his horses. She was watching him, seeing something he'd forgotten existed. Her visits became as certain as the sunrise. Every morning at 8, she appeared with a small cloth bundle, stood for an hour, then left without glancing at the house. Silas watched from the shadows, his porch, the barn, the window, trying to unravel the puzzle of her presence. On the 5th day, curiosity broke his isolation. He saddled his horse and rode to town, a place he hadn't visited in months. The main street felt alien, townsfolk staring as he passed. At the general store, Otis Clay loaded supplies into a wagon. Silas, once a regular customer, scribbled on paper, "That your daughter?" Otis glanced up, surprised. "Clara?" "Yeah, she's mine. Born deaf, but sharp as a tack." "Why?" Silas pointed toward his ranch. Otis's face darkened. "She's been bothering you?" "I'll talk to her teacher. She shouldn't be wandering." Silas shook his head, unable to explain that Clara's visits were the only thing he looked forward to, that her silent presence eased a 3-year ache. Otis misread the gesture. "Look, I know you value your privacy. She won't trouble you again." Dread settled in Silas's gut as he rode home. The next morning, he waited by the window. 8 o'clock passed. No blue dress appeared. The silence, once peaceful, now felt empty, wrong. For the first time since he'd stopped speaking, Silas felt truly alone. But then, a flash of blue caught his eye, moving through the tall grass behind his property, far from the road. Clara hadn't given up. She'd found another way. She'd taken a path through the creek bed, clever enough to avoid her father's notice. Emerging from the grass, her dress damp, she walked straight to Sunset, Silas's gentle bay mare. The horse lowered her head, letting Clara stroke her neck. There was a natural ease in how Clara moved around the animals, as if she spoke their language better than most spoke to each other. Silas made his first mistake. He stepped from the barn. Clara saw him and, instead of running, smiled and waved, a gesture that struck him like a blow. When had anyone been happy to see him? He approached the fence, each step crossing years of solitude. Clara pointed to the horse, then herself, tilting her head. Silas understood. He wrote in the dirt, sunset. Her face lit up. She pointed to herself, spelling letters in the air, then wrote in the dirt, Clara. For the first time in 3 years, Silas felt the urge to speak, not out of necessity, but desire. It terrified him. Words had failed him at his wife's grave, useless against grief, so he'd vowed silence. But Clara didn't need his words. She'd found a way to reach him without them. She wrote, friend. The word hung like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Hoofbeats interrupted. 3 riders approached fast, Otis Clay, Sheriff Wade McKinley, and Nora Harrow, Clara's teacher. Otis dismounted, face red with anger. Clarabelle Clay, get away from that fence. Clara couldn't hear, but she saw his rage and stepped back, defiance replacing her earlier joy. Nora approached, signing swiftly to Clara, who responded, pointing to Silas and the horses. An argument unfolded in gestures. She says she's learning about horses, Nora translated. Claims you're teaching her. All eyes turned to Silas. The sheriff's hand rested near his gun, cautious. Otis glared. She's 12, Ward. People talk. They wonder what a silent man wants with a deaf child. The accusation stung. Silas wrote, she visits. No harm. No harm. Otis snapped. You're a grown man living alone. People wonder. Clara signed frantically. Nora hesitated. She says he's not like other adults. He understands quiet. I don't care, Otis said. Clara, get in the wagon. Clara didn't move. She walked to Silas, looked up with trust, and signed deliberately. Nora translated softly, she asked him not to disappear. The word struck deep. Clara saw what the adults missed, this moment could push Silas further into isolation. She was fighting for their connection. Otis wasn't swayed. Get in the wagon, or the sheriff escorts you. Clara stood firm, signing rapidly. Nora translated, she says you don't understand being different. This man does. Silas's chest cracked open. His silence wasn't just grief, it was a prison. Then he did the unthinkable. He spoke, voice rusty from disuse. Wait. Everyone froze. Clara's eyes widened. Silas forced out more words, let her choose. Nora stepped forward. You're saying Clara should decide? Silas nodded, writing, knows her own mind. She's 12. Otis protested. Clara signed excitedly. Nora translated, she's been teaching him sign language. He learns fast because he knows silence. Clara demonstrated, signing friend and horse. Silas mirrored her. Otis's concern deepened. This ends today. She has lessons, chores. Silas wrote, I pay for lessons. Otis bristled. My daughter's not for hire. Clara knelt, writing in the dirt, I am not broken. The words hit Otis like a blow. His daughter, always seen as needing fixing, had found someone who saw her strength. Before anyone could respond, Sunset snorted, ears pinned. A low rumble grew, dust clouds on the horizon. Stampede, the sheriff said. 30-40 cattle, running scared. Clara couldn't hear, but she saw the alarm. Silas rushed to the fence, knowing someone had to turn the herd. He mounted Sunset and, in a split-second decision, offered Clara his hand. Otis shouted, she can't hear you. But Clara understood. She'd watched Silas for weeks. She took his hand, swinging up behind him. They rode toward the stampede, Clara's arms around his waist. She couldn't hear, but she felt his movements, guiding Sunset in a wide arc around the cattle. Silas applied gentle pressure, angling the horse to turn the herd. Clara waved her arms, helping guide the animals. After 20 minutes, the cattle veered toward open range, away from the ranch. Back at the fence, Otis helped Clara down, fear and awe on his face. "Are you hurt?" Clara signed, and Nora translated. "We worked perfectly. I felt what he needed." "I've never seen anything like that," Otis said. "You moved like one." Silas wrote, "She understands." "I see that," Otis said. To Clara, "Is this what you want? To learn here?" Clara nodded, signing, "I've never felt more useful. Being different is an advantage here." Otis turned to Silas. "If I allow this, you keep her safe." Silas wrote, "With my life." The next morning, Clara returned with her cloth bundle, revealing a slate and chalk for their lessons. Silas had found his voice. Not in words, but in a connection that transcended barriers. Clara had found a place where her differences were her strength. They spent the morning learning signs, teaching each other in the language of silence.